Greetings, fellow Earthlings. Even as the COVID-19 pandemic appears to be winding down, we're still not quite to the point where we can safely meet inside our amazing Zeiss Planetarium at the Chabot Space and Science Center. However, we can always use nature's planetarium, also known as the real sky, to step outside, tilt our heads back, and see at least some of the amazing things I'll be pointing out for you tonight. I am, of course, talking about the constellations. There are people, animals, and objects up there in the night sky. They've been there for millennia, but most people are unaware of them as they glide by unnoticed right over our heads every clear night. Tonight, we will amend this sad state of affairs and put you, the audience, on your first steps towards astronomical enlightenment. The Earth has 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. Well, the constellations also have seasons, having to do with the Earth's yearly orbital path around the Sun. I want you to think about that for a moment. The constellations have seasons too. Just realizing this fully can help make knowing the constellations easier. We can only see stars by looking away from the Sun at night, which changes our view of the stars as the Earth makes its orbit around the Sun throughout the year. Unfortunately, unless you're at a good dark sky site, and if the moon isn't too bright, most constellations will be somewhat hard to see fully. But most constellations have at least a few bright stars to help identify them, and the better your viewing location, the more you'll be able to see. A good first step to finding the constellations is done by knowing your compass directions. We can easily do this without a compass, using a star grouping that is quite easy to see and most everyone knows, the Big Dipper. If you don't know the Big Dipper, have someone who does point it out for you. Around this time of year, the Dipper is face down, but it's still easy to see with its curving handle and bowl. Take special note of the 2 stars at the end of the bowl. These are called the pointers, because if you take the distance between them and extend that distance out about 5 times, they point to this semi-bright star here. Now, Polaris is the only star in the entire sky that stays pretty much right where it is. So no matter what time of night it is, or even what month of the year it is, if you're located anywhere north of the Earth's equator, all you need to do is face it, and you'll always be facing due north, with east directly to your right, west directly to your left, and south directly behind you. All the other stars wheel around this pivot point anti-clockwise, making them appear to rise in the east and set in the west. This is, of course, an illusion caused by the Earth's rotation, which gives the appearance that the stars are moving when, in fact, it's the Earth that's spinning. If you think of the Earth as a spinning top, and you extend Earth's north polar axis straight up into the sky, it points almost directly at Polaris. Using Polaris, we found all the compass directions, but Polaris is also the end of the Little Dipper's handle, whose official name is Ursa Minor, the Little Bear, and our next constellation. It's a bit faint, but from Polaris you might be able to trace its curving handle to its bowl. The 2 brighter stars at the end of its bowl are called the Guardians, because they seem to march around the North Star like protective sentries throughout the night. Now, you probably didn't notice that I called the Little Dipper, also known as Ursa Minor, the Little Bear, a constellation, while earlier I called the Big Dipper a star grouping. Isn't the Big Dipper a constellation too? No. The Big Dipper is what we astronomers call an asterism, which is different from an actual constellation. The Big Dipper is only part of the constellation Ursa Major, the Great Bear, as seen here. He's totally upside down from this view, but here's what he looks like right side up. As you can see, the end of the so-called Big Dipper's handle is his nose. The Dipper's curving handle is the back of his neck, and the Dipper's bowl is like a saddle on the bear's back. Got it? Good. To continue, let's turn our view to the south, like so. This will flip everything we've seen so far upside down, and will enable us to find the rest of the night's major constellations more easily. Arcing relatively high above the southern horizon is a kind of invisible line where all the zodiacal constellations can be found. This line is called the ecliptic, and is also where the sun, moon, and planets move. This is why the zodiacal constellations were so significant to astrologers. Not that astronomy scientists believe in the pseudoscience of astrology. Most do not. But astrologers were some of history's first astronomers, and for their early work we are in their debt. Going from left to right, or from east to west on the ecliptic, our first zodiacal constellation for April is Virgo, the Virgin. Most of her stars are pretty faint, and her overall shape is pretty rough as an approximation of a woman lying down. But she has a head, one arm pointing up, a body, two legs, and of course her shiny rump star, Spica. To the right, or west of Virgo, we have Leo, the lion. He's got a head, a neck with a mane, body, legs, and a tail. Located in his front foot, Leo's brightest star is called Regulus, and it's the 22nd brightest star in the sky. To the west of Leo, we find the zodiacal constellation Cancer, the crab. Unfortunately for Cancer, it is quite faint, and unless you're at a fairly good dark sky site with no moon, you'll never find it. As you can see from the illustration, it's a very simple constellation made up of a kind of squashed rectangle, with a couple of sticks coming off the top, which are meant to be the crab's arms. Not too impressive, but this constellation does contain a very pretty deep sky object, M44. In just a bit, I'll describe how to find M44, but first we've got to find another zodiacal constellation. To the west of Cancer, we find Gemini, the twins. This constellation is one of the easier ones to see, as it is composed of fairly bright stars that make up their heads, arms, bodies, and legs. The two brightest stars in this constellation are the twin brothers' heads, Pollux on the left and Castor on the right. Now to find M44, the beehive, draw an imaginary line from Regulus in Leo to the closer twin's head, Pollux. Just a bit past and below the center of that line, you'll find M44. It's in the upper right part of Cancer's head. Check it out with a pair of binoculars if you get the chance. It's actually quite pretty. To the west of the twins, and our last zodiacal constellation at this time, is Taurus, the bull. He's got a big, somewhat triangularly shaped head, two horns, front and back legs, a body, and a tail. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see the back end of his body, as it's already set below the horizon. But I had to mention him because he has the only planet visible to the naked eye in the night sky, orange Mars, located between his left horn and the tip of his nose. By the time you watch this, NASA's recently landed rover, Perseverance, will have driven to a designated flat and level space to deploy and launch history's first helicopter on another planet. It's not supposed to happen before April 8th, so if we're lucky, by the time you hear this, maybe we'll get to watch it happen as it happens. Cross your fingers. Leaving the ecliptic, I have saved the best for last, Orion the Hunter. This constellation is composed of the most bright stars of all the other constellations from both the Earth's northern and southern hemispheres, and is known by most people in the world. He's got a little tiny head, broad shoulders. He's holding aloft a somewhat faint club in one hand, while his other holds forth a shield. Then there's his famous belt of 3 stars, a sword hanging from his belt, and his legs and feet. If you look closely at his sword of 3 stars, you'll notice the middle star looks a bit fuzzy. Take another look with a pair of binoculars, and you'll see it's not a star at all, but a fuzzy little smudge. A look at even greater magnification with a telescope will reveal a cloud with striations and details. This is the Great Nebula in Orion, a place where new stars are being born, a sort of stellar nursery, if you will, and as you can see, quite beautiful. Our last 2 constellations for the night are Orion's Dogs, Canis Major, the great dog, and Canis Minor, the little dog, which I figure must be a wiener dog because it's just 2 stars. though one of the stars is Procyon, the 9th brightest star in the sky. Not to be outdone, Canis Major has the brightest star in the entire night sky, Sirius, the dog star. The ancient Egyptians used to use the first sight of this star as a notice for the annual flood of the Nile and for when to plant crops. And that's it. There are other smaller or fainter constellations out there, which I encourage you to look for using a good book and maybe a pair of binoculars too. Speaking of good books, I cannot more highly recommend the book The Stars, A New Way to See Them by the author H.A. Rey, whom you may know as the same author who wrote the Curious George books. Rey was a scientist who wasn't satisfied with the way modern star charts were being drawn. The astroscientists were not interested in the characters or the objects or the stories behind the constellations, so for convenience they just connected the brighter stars into weird geometric shapes, slapped on their Greek names, many of which would mean nothing to the common person, and left it at that. That's all well and good for them, but for us regular folks, we're more interested in the fun stuff. If you really want to learn the constellations, get Rey's book, which can be purchased from Amazon for about $18. I'd also recommend getting a pair of binoculars before getting a telescope. Binoculars are cheaper and easier to use, and there are many wonderful deep sky objects that can actually be best seen with just a pair of binoculars. They are noted in Rey's book. If you do want to get a telescope, ask us or research on the web how to make an informed purchase. Be warned, there are a lot of bad telescopes out there with cheap components and shaky, muddy, fuzzy views that will disappoint you every time. A good scope will inspire you and your children to a lifetime of deep space exploration and an appreciation of science and nature in general. If you're interested in getting into the hobby of astronomy, joining a local astronomy club can be most helpful. Chabot is partnered with the EAS, the East Bay Astronomical Society, which has many activities and resources you'll find essential to help you get started in this amazing and beautiful study of our natural universe. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked this content, be sure to click the thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell notification icon to find out when new content has been uploaded. This will really help our channel to grow, which would make us all very happy. And until we meet again, we'll see you in the future!